developer of the show, I mean the creators, they know exactly that the audience they're appealing to is, for the most part, going to be quite familiar with the idiom established by the Silence of the Lambs. So they're working very hard to satisfy those who are expecting that, to the extent that you have many of the same characters. You even have the same visual style, the same color palette choices and the cinematography. You've even got the same font that was used on screen and some of the identifiers, you know, for some of the scenes in the Silence of the Lambs. So, I mean, that's all there as familiar touchstones for us, but they also know that they have to upend the conventions. Well, they have to upset our expectations.
I don't worry about us so much.
Right.
Because we're quote-unquote normal. Right? Okay.
I'll take that as an assumption.
What I worry about is maybe the unbalanced element that's out there watching this, and what that might do to them. You know, will it translate to action in the real world? The notion that a copycat murderer exists tells you that that could happen. And so these shows are detailing some very horrific types of crimes, and how could that translate? And should we be concerned?
They're doing so in these extremely hyper exaggerated ways.
Yes.
I just think of some of the images I've seen on Hannibal, the series over this past season. Things I could, maybe even 5 years ago, never imagining a not prime time, but never imagining a network television show to take us. You know, just some of the graphic imagery.
Agreed.
Very violent, very disturbing. And does it provide a blueprint for people to act out on? I think is one of the things you might be asking. And I don't think it's entirely beyond the realm of possibility that if someone who is drawn to this material for whatever reason is inclined to go that way anyway, you know, they may be provided with a more imaginary blueprint or template to follow than they otherwise might have come up with on their own. But is there a cumulative effect where someone who is not predisposed to this kind of behavior would see this kind of media over and over again and then be drawn to it? I'm not aware of any studies that conclusively prove it one way or the other. I know there's a lot of debate on this very issue. I'm certainly not in a position to come up with a definitive answer, since I study the representation as opposed to the actual sociological effect. But having said all that, I do know there's concern about it. And, you know, I understand that concern, because some of these stories are profoundly destabilizing in ways that, as someone who is trained in studying symbology and how narrative works, I understand what's happening, and I think many folks do, even if they don't always articulate it, just because they've been so visual. They've been watching movies and television since they were old enough to comprehend the images in front of them. But are there those who are so unstable that it might flip a switch?
For me, it's almost like the train wreck. Every time Hannibal comes on, I don't want to watch it, but I want to watch it, you know? So I can't quite, it does disturb me, but I'm attracted to it. It's that duality that's very interesting to me.
It's the duality, and it's in some ways the abyss that Nietzsche spoke of. When you gaze into the abyss, you must make sure that, you know, you do not become a monster yourself, to badly paraphrase. And so I think that's really the attraction and yet the repulsion that you're talking about. And that is critical, a key aspect of the aesthetic of horror.
Yeah.
There's a book called The Philosophy of Horror, as a matter of fact, which deals with all kinds of monstrous representations, serial killers and murderers being one of the types of monsters that are discussed there. But there's plenty of others we can think about. And what's profoundly disturbing about horror is this transgressive nature of it, that boundaries that we consider to be impermeable are quite permeable. It's almost like a type of metaphoric or visual pollution when we have these monsters. They combine aspects of the human, but they also combine aspects of the inhuman in very disturbing and upsetting ways. And the serial killer, I think, is a very disturbing monster because he or she looks human,
right,
in most cases.